Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Shuchandra Ghosh, Professor, Department of Ancient Indian History and Culture, University of Calcutta. The title of the paper is Indian Culture, and the broad heading of Indian numismatics. I will be discussing today the Indo-Scythian and the Indo-Parthian coins. As you know, the northwestern part of the Indian subcontinent was ruled for a pretty long time by different groups of foreigners coming from the west. After the Greco-Bactrians and the Indo-Greeks, we have the presence of the Indo-Scythians and the Indo-Parthians in this region, followed by the Kushanas. The history of the Indo-Scythians has to be studied from their coinages because other sources are very rare. Scythian is a generic term used for the people who were ruling originally in Central Asia, and from there they moved into parts of West Asia and South Asia. Among the groups of Scythians, Maois, or known as Moga in the inscriptions, was the first group who came downwards from the Pamirs to the area of India, which was known as Taxila region. Apart from Maoist group, there are other groups of Scythian rulers who are known as Vonones, and with Vonones there were rulers like Agis, Agilices and Agis II. So the Vonones group ruled mainly in the Arakotian region of the South Asia. They had a system of joint rulership, so therefore there was always a co-ruler, and in their coins what we find is that on the obverse with the Greek legend, they have the name of the main ruler, and on the reverse with the Prakrit legend written in Kharoshti, they have the name of the subordinate ruler. Otherwise, these rulers followed the Greek tradition of issuing coinages, often using the same deities for their reverse devices. Here you can see the map on which the territory of the Scythians are demarcated. So therefore you know that the Scythians ruled in the regions of Taxila, that is where Maois was centered, the region to the west and east of the Indus region in Arakosia, and they moved, particularly the Agis group, moved as far as Mathura. The earliest Shaka kingdom was established in 158 BC in a region of extreme northwestern section of the subcontinent. This included the Darel Valley and the Swat Valley on the Indus. The area was then known as part of Chipin. The extension of the Shaka ruler to Shadheri, that is the present Takshila region, is suggested by an inscription in that locality which talks of the great king, the great Moga. Moga has been universally identified with Mo or Maois of legends on a several variety of coins. The group of Maois was ousted from the Taxila area and also perhaps from Gandhara to the west of the Indus by the Indo-Greek ruler Hippostratus. So you will see that while the Indo-Greeks were present in different pockets of northwest India, Maois had already entered into the subcontinent. So there was an ambience of political contestation, and therefore sometimes one ruler subsumed the other ruler. Maois was the first of the rulers, and he issued several coin types which are very important. For example, we have coins where we have the depiction of elephant on his obverse, and then we have on the depiction of caduceus on the reverse. And what is interesting to note that Maois did not have coins with his own portrait. We have another very interesting coin issued by Maois, and this is probably from the Taxila mint, where we have that Helios, we have the sun god Helios, who is actually driving a biga, that is charioteer in biga, and then on the reverse we have Zeus sitting on a throne. So these type of coins were produced in the mint from Taxila, and therefore from the coin types we can understand the territorial extension of these rulers. Another interesting type is the Zeus Nike type, where you have the standing Zeus on the obverse, and on the reverse you have the Nike, who is holding a wreath on her hand, and you have a particular monogram. A third important type of coins for Maoists is radiate Artemis. This is a very interesting type because you do not find it in many coins of many rulers. So here we have Artemis who is radiate, and the chiton is blowing on the wind. On the reverse you have the humped bull, which is a significant signifier of the Pushkalavati region. So you have reference to Pushkalavati perhaps in the that is in the Peshawar district. So this coin can be identified as a coin from Pushkalavati. Another interesting coin type of Maoists was that where we have Heracles. He uses the reverse device of the Indo-Greeks as his obverse, and we find that Heracles standing facing holding club, and he's having a lion skin, and on the reverse we have lion walking to the left. The device which Maoists issued was that of Zeus standing half left, male deity is standing facing. A very important and interesting coin type that has been found in the coins of Maoists is that of representation of Machini. She is sitting on a throne, and on the reverse you have Zeus with Nike. Now Machini is not an Indo-Greek name, so perhaps she was from some other Scythian family, and Maoist group probably had some kind of matrimonial alliance with Machini. Therefore she is represented in the obverse, and on the reverse we have the representation very typical of Maoist, Zeus with Nike. There is another coin type which is very rare, where we normally, because as I mentioned earlier, we do not have Maoist's portrait, but here this coin is said to be having a ruler sitting on a horse, and said to be of Maoist, and on the reverse we have the Nike type. What we find then next is that with Maoist, if we look at his coin types, we have Maoist ruling in regions to the west of the Gandhara, regions to the northwest of India. For example, the Artemis type was taken from the coins of Artemidorus, and then we have his coins in the Taxila region. So therefore, the territory of Maoists which was under his control can be said to be the region of Taxila, Gandhara, Hazara district, and regions to the west of the Indus, and larger part of the northwest India, from where actually the Greeks reconquered and then started to rule, and it was the Indo-Greeks ruler Apollodotus II who recovered some areas from Maoist's territory. Now we will come to the second group of Scythian rulers, of whom the most famous were Agis I, Agilicis and Agis II. They belong to the Vonones group of Arachosia. Vonones declared independence from the Arsacid rulers and began to rule in Arachosian region with the joint co-rulership of Spelirices, Polohora and others. We have Agis I ruling with Spelirices, while Spelirices was in the obverse and Agis's name was on the reverse. As you can understand that these two rulers, they succeeded the realm of Maoists in the Indian subcontinent. The coinage of these two Scythian kings forms a uniform series of coinage that succeeded Maoist's coinage and was itself followed by coinage of Agis II. Recent study by Robert Senior argues that there were no Agis II, it's only one Agis, but this is not accepted in general. Therefore, we have the two rulers in the name of Agis. So one was Agis I and the other was Agis II. Large part of the northwest of India was under the control of Agis I, and his huge output of coins suggests this great increase in coinage and leading to increase in wealth. He might have reached to the northern section of the northwestern section of the Indian subcontinent from Arachosia through the Gomal Pass and through the regions watered by the Gomal, Tochi and Kurram rivers. The extent of his kingdom can be understood from the reverse devices of his coins, whereas the mountain, for example, the mounted king armed palace Athena type can be located in the Bajaur territory, and whereas the Taxila type has For example, the Zeus with Nike was located in the Taxila region. These territories were conquered from the Indo-Greek ruler Hippostratus. That these territories in Punjab was taken over by Agis I is also corroborated by the Ambala horde, which stops with the coins of Hippostratus. From the Indo-Greeks, Agis I also conquered the Sin-Sagar Doab, including Taxila. The figure of standing Zeus holding a Nike is very common and has been attributed to the Taxila region. Agis is represented as Oyo in the coins of his coins. So the obverse legend as the Indo-Greeks was in Greek, and the reverse legend was in Kharoshti and Prakharshti script and Prakrit language. Now, how do we know about the presence of two edges, or how do we identify the two edges? We have certain signifier. Number one, the basic criterion has been that the mounted horseman shown on the obverse of most of the coins of Agis I contains a spear, while coins of Agis II carries a whip. Secondly, the other criteria for differentiating between coins of Agis I and those of Agis II is based on control marks, metrology and coin types. Coins of Agis I are characterized by different ranges of control mark from those used by Agis II. The third point is Agis II's coin are highly debased. There was evolution from broad thin flanks to smaller thick flanks during the time of Agis II. So the good quality coins belonged to Agis I and the coarse crude coins belonged to the reign of Agis II. Finally, Agis I used the title Rojo Rojoso in general, whereas Agis II used Rojati Rojoso. So these are the different markers, but we have to remember that it was not happening simultaneously in all the coins. Now we will go gradually to the coins which represent one of the areas where Agis I or Agilices or Agis II ruled. The joint rulership was such that first we had coins of Agis I on the obverse, name of Agilices on the reverse, then we had Agis I ruling independently, then Agilices, Agis II ruling independently, and then Agis II ruling with a Kshatrapa ruler. In this particular coin, this is from Pushkalavati, it is very interesting that we have the representation of a humped bull and we have the representation, this is the city goddess is actually represented in the obverse and the bull is represented on the reverse. So the city goddess wears a turreted crown. This is an inspiration from the Greek city goddess Tuke, where here it is Amba and the legend says Pakhalavati Devata Ambae. Another very interesting coin type of Agis and Agilices are that in one of the coins, for example, we have Maois's coin, you have Zeus Nike, but if you look at the Agilices coin, here you have the representation of Lakshmi standing and she is being anointed by two elephants. This is the Abhichinchan of Lakshmi type and this was found in the Mathura region. So this shows that Mathura was under the control of Agilices. The Zeus Nike type is also a very common type which was used for the Taxila region, and Agis along with Maois continued the Zeus Nike type in this region. As I mentioned earlier that when we have to identify Agis I, we have to see that whether the mounted king device, which was the very common device among the Indo-Scythians, whether he is holding a spear or he is holding a whip. Here in the mounted king device, we find that Agis is being represented as sitting on a horse with a spear, and on the reverse we have winged Nike holding a wreath as if she is ready to crown somebody. This is a very coarse picture, very crude, but it shows again the mounted king with the spear, and on the reverse you have Zeus standing with his thunderbolt on his right hand and his stand on his left, and a scepter on his left, and there is a monogram also. Agilices coin used also the type where we have the mounted king along with the spear, and on the reverse you have Nike holding a reed. So he continued the coin type which was used by Agis first. Another very interesting coin type was issued by Agilices, and this is the mounted king along with the Dioscuri. The Dioscuri we have already seen was prevalent among the Indus-Greek ruler. For example, Eucratides had used the Dioscuri, the two brothers Castor and Pollux, in his coins, and here we find Dioscuri is not riding a horse as in the Indo-Greek coins, but here the two brothers are standing, facing, holding their scepter, kind of spear kind of thing, and they are represented with a kind of headdress which is known as the pilos. Sometimes we do not have the representation of the image of the brothers on, instead, as in the Indo-Greek coins, we had only the representation of the palms and the piloi in the picture. So in this coin we have the representation of a king, mounted king, sitting on a horse with a whip on the hand, and on the reverse we have Pallas Athena represented. And if you look carefully, you will find the dress of the king. He is wearing a cataphractus type of garment, which is actually the common garment that was being used by the rulers of these regions. Particularly the Scythians were very using cataphractus, and that is being represented in the coins. What we can see from the study of these coins is that we have three rulers. For example, Agis first, Agilices and Agis II. Now from their coin types we find that Agis first was ruling in Arachosia, to the regions to the east and west of the Indus River, and to regions of northwestern Punjab, northwestern part of the Indian subcontinent. Agilices continued with this, but then he extended his power till the Mathura region. When Agis II had come, then Agis II lost Arachosia, because we have this text called Strathmoi Parthikoi from the written by Isidore of Charax of the 1st century BCE, which mentions that this region, Arachosia, was within the realm of the Arsacids, that is the Parthians. Therefore, Agis II lost Arachosia to the Parthians, and he had control over regions till the Mathura area. We have also inscriptions to suggest that Agis II was collaborating with his general strategos Aspavarman, and who was the son of Indravarman. So in this way we find that this group, that is the Agis group, continued to rule for a longer period and for a large part of the Indian subcontinent. Another very important feature of this is that we have an era known as the Agis era, which is similar to the Vikrama era and which starts from 58 BCE. The inscriptions of the region writes that this inscription was inscribed in the year of the king Aya, that is Aja, and that is identified by Agis. So we now know an era was instituted by Agis first in 58 BC. We have some barbarous copies of Agis and Agilices as tetrarachum, which you can see here. So which shows that coins are always not beautifully stuck. Sometimes we have very debased coins which are copies and are not in a very good condition. Now we shall move to the third set of the beginning of the Indo-Parthians. And the Indo-Parthian rulers ruled in the same region where the Indo-Scythians were ruling. So the Indo-Parthians actually succeeded the Indo-Scythians. Its presence in Arachosia and Shakastana, the two regions of the Parthian Empire, are well attested by the numismatic evidence. And like in other coinages, other examples too, these Indo-Parthians also issued a number of coins, and for writing or reconstructing their history, we have to depend mainly on their coin types. But we are lucky here, we have one inscription, the Taktibahi inscription, which refers to one, it is in the Peshawar district and refers to one Guduvara who has been identified with Gondophares of coins. He ruled in the middle of the 1st century CE. The first ruler who founded this dynasty and began to carve out a kingdom by expanding his control from Sistan through Arakosia and north to the Kabul valley and over Gandhara and the neighboring regions was Gondophares. He may have begun to rule towards the end of Agis II's reign. And what is interesting is that he is referred to in the Act of Thomas. The story goes that Gondophares wanted to build a palace, and he asked his Raja Sreshti, whose name was Habban, to get him a carpenter. So Saint Thomas came to the court of Gondophares disguised as a carpenter in order to propagate Christianity. Therefore, the story of Saint Thomas coming to northwestern part of Indian subcontinent is referred to in the Acts of Thomas. Gondophares was succeeded by a series of rulers, of whom we have the names of Orthognes, Pacorus, Sassus and others. You can see in the map the Indo-Parthian kingdom, and if you compare it with Indo-Scythians, you will find that more or less the same territories were under their control. So we have a part of Arakosia which was later on taken away. Then we have Taxila, we have Shagala, that is Sialkot, then we have the Kabul Begram region, the region to the west of the Indus, and we have the lower Indus country within the territory of Gondophares. A very important port known as Barbaricon was at that time active in the lower Indus country, and according to the opinion of Periplus tes Erythras Thalasus, we find that in this region the Parthian princes were ruling, and it is said that they were chasing each other, which means after Gondophares there were several Parthian rulers who were involved in infighting among themselves. Gondophares' coins can be understood from particular symbols, because in all his coins and the coins of his followers we have some symbols. Here we can see in the coins of Arakosia, we have the king mounting a mounted king in the obverse, and on the reverse we have the representation of the Gondopharian symbol. From Gandhara we have the mounted king riding, and then we have Zeus looking towards the right. In these coins, please notice that stylistically they are different, a little degraded from the coins of the earlier. So there is no naturalism in the modeling that we found in the coins of the Greeks. As I mentioned, the Act of Thomas. So if we look at the chronology of Gondophares, then we find that we have to place him in around 220 to 46 CE, and because the Taktibahi inscription is dated in the year of Agis and the date is known to us 103, therefore Gondophares is placed during a period between 20 to 46 CE. Now in this coin type we can see again that Gondophares is riding on a horse. We have the Gondopharian symbol, and then we have Zeus represented on the reverse. The bust Nike type of Gondophares was issued in the lower part of the Indus region. This region was unaffected by the debasement of coins, and as I mentioned earlier that Barbaricon was an important port in this region, and therefore trade relations was very important for the rulers who were ruling in this region. Now we will see certain coin types of Gondophares which were being issued, and you will see that in each of the coin types the Gondopharian symbol is there. The king is holding a whip, and then you have representation of gods in the on the obverse and as well as in the reverse. But what is important is that when we look at the coin types of Gondophares, we find that he controlled the lower Indus country, which is represented by the coin type of Zeus Nike, and then we have that he controlled the Gandharan area, took charge of that area. He continued the king mounted on horseback like his predecessors, the Indo-Scythians. For the western part of the Gandhara area, which included Pushkalavati, he actually gave it to the subordinate rulers, the Apracha Rajas. He ousted the Rajuvula and his successors from the region of the Jammu Pathankot area. So in this way, he held control over a larger part of the northwestern part of the subcontinent. In this series, if you look at this coin, we find that the Greek practice of using bust was again revived, that is the royal portraits. And so you have the bust left on the left wearing round topped headdress, and it is double struck on the obverse, and on the reverse you have king enthroned right, crowned by winged Nike standing, which stands behind him. So always remember that winged Nike was the goddess of victory for the Greeks, and so the symbolism of Nike was very important for this ruler. Whenever they wanted to show some kind of victory, it was important for them that they use the device of either Nike singularly holding a wreath on her hands, or having Nike with Zeus, which gave it a further legitimation. The successors of Gangapharis, one of the very important successors were Orthagnis. He issued a series of coins where we have the bust of the ruler, and you can see the Parthian element in the iconography, in the face, and on the reverse we have representation of Nike, sometimes Pallas Athena. So these kind of devices continued. Then we have representation of the Indo-Parthian ruler Pacorus. Pacorus too used winged Nike, bust of the king in the obverse and winged Nike on the reverse. This slide actually explains that how with the passage of time some of the alphabets changed during the time of the Parthians. So therefore, for example, instead of sigma, we have the lunate sigma, which looks like a C, and so when they are writing Basilios, Basilion, so they are using this lunate sigma. Then we have, instead of the round omicron, we have the square omicron, we have square rho, we have square omega. So there is a shift, and from these letterings we can understand the change in the writing style. Doric sigma was introduced in the borderland later on during the time of the Kushanas. The Gondophaриan kingdom was quite vast, and it extended from Sistan to the northwestern part of the subcontinent, and what we find is that he probably gave a lot of room to the Kshatrapas, to the satraps who were ruling under him. Here this is a coin of a satrap standing to right, facing Greek city goddess, and goddess of good fortune Tuke is standing to the left. Tuke holds a diadem or a wreath as if ready to crown the satrap, and also she holds a cornucopia. So the symbolism of this coin type is that the satrap was actually gaining power in during that 1st century CE in the northwestern part of the subcontinent. Gondopharis continued to rule, and it was there were geographical variations, and we find that he expanded his influence from the Sistan to the river Sutlej. His policy of conquest was by a system of absorption, where local rulers were allowed to have some kind of own independence. The kingdom collapsed as a result of the intervention by the Kushanas, and we find that this happened we know about this from the overstrikes of Kujula Quadphises over the coins of Gondopharis. This indicates very clearly that Kujula brought to an end the Parthian rule in the Paroponisadai, Kabul Begram region and Gandhara. So there were many rulers in the Indo-Parthian kingdom who followed Gondopharis, whose names can be said as Abdagases, Pacorus, Orthagnes, Sassils, and so on. Therefore, we find that when we look in totality, the period of the Indo-Scythian and the Indo-Parthians, we find that this was a period where we have lot of political contestations, rulers from different dynasties ruling over the same pockets, having some kind of rivalry, but the coins also show from the reverse devices a kind of accommodation, and though they followed the most of the devices from the Indo-Greeks, there were some local inputs also. For example, the Abhishinchan of Lakshmi, then elephant with 3 riders. So these were the innovations that happened from the indigenous area, because they were copying the local types of the Mathura region. Agilicers, as I have shown, that agilicers of coins had this Abhishinchan of Lakshmi type, and these were this area were taken from the local rulers by the Indo-Scythians. Thus, it was a territory where there were multiple rulers having accommodation and sometimes using local devices on their coins. Thank you.